They said everything in the neighborhood belonged to everyone. Community property, they called it. But when a screaming HOA president named Karen stood in my driveway, demanding access to the private lake I'd built and paid for, I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about control. What she didn't know was that I had something she didn't, a folder that could end her reign of power in one sentence. When I finally opened that folder in front of the entire HOA board, she turned pale, because every inch she called community property was legally mine. It started when I moved into a quiet lakeside community called Willow Creek Estates, a place that looked peaceful on the outside but operated like a private dictatorship once you looked closer. Every mailbox was painted the same beige color, every lawn cut to a uniform height, and every family greeted you with the same tight, polite smile, the kind that hides gossip. I bought the last property on the cul-de-sac, a 2-acre corner lot with a small private lake tucked behind it. What most people didn't know was that the lake was technically outside the HOA boundary. It wasn't part of the community amenities. It was deeded land, included in my purchase contract. I owned it, but that didn't matter to Karen, the HOA president. She was the kind of woman who treated bylaws like holy scripture, always clutching a clipboard, always looking for someone to fine. Her power didn't come from authority, it came from intimidation. The first time she appeared, it was about my mailbox. She said the shade of black I'd painted it wasn't the approved hue. Then came the warning letter for leaving my kayak by the water's edge. And later, she accused me of using unauthorized fencing material when I added a small gate leading to the lake. It was petty. Annoying. But I ignored it, until she crossed the line. One weekend, I came home to find a group of neighbors fishing by the lake. My lake. They waved cheerfully, assuming I didn't mind. I asked them politely who gave permission, and they said, "Karen told us this lake is community property now." Community property. That word triggered something in me. When I went to confront her, she smiled like it was nothing. She said the HOA board had voted to make the lake accessible to all residents, since it was within visual proximity to other homes, whatever that meant. I showed her the survey map and the property deed. She waved them off. "You might think you own it," she said, "but the HOA has rules about shared spaces. You can't just claim nature." That was the moment I realized. She wasn't enforcing rules, she was rewriting them. Over the next few weeks, things escalated fast. First came the notices, failure to comply with community sharing guidelines. Then, unauthorized fencing around Community Lake. She even fined me $500 for restricting resident access to common property. It was absurd. I called the HOA office, and every time the secretary said, "You'll have to talk to Karen." But Karen didn't return calls. She left letters, stacks of them. The final straw came one morning when I looked outside and saw construction equipment parked by the lake. HOA workers, on my property, were installing a wooden dock for community use. I stormed outside. "You can't do that," I said. Karen crossed her arms, smirking. "The board approved it. You can't approve something on private land." She leaned closer. "It's community property. The residents have a right to enjoy it." It wasn't anger I felt in that moment. It was disbelief, the arrogance, the entitlement. She truly believed the HOA had power over property deeds, over legal ownership. I called the county clerk's office, pulled every record I could find, and hired a property attorney. The lawyer took one look at the papers and laughed. "You're in the clear. The HOA has zero authority here. But if they've used HOA funds for construction, that's misappropriation." And that's when the plan started forming. I didn't just want to stop Karen. I wanted to expose her. Over the next few days, I documented everything: photos, timestamps, invoices, HOA notices, even her dock building crew. I waited as the project neared completion. And then I called for a special HOA board meeting, citing land ownership concerns. Karen showed up, confident as ever. The meeting was packed, residents whispering about the selfish neighbor who didn't want to share the lake. She started the meeting with her usual speech about community unity and equal access. I waited. Let her talk. Then, when it was my turn, I stood up, placed a thick folder on the table, and said, "This folder contains the original land deed, signed and notarized, showing that the lake and the surrounding area are privately owned by me, not the HOA." The room went quiet. Karen's smile faltered. She said, "That's not possible. That land is listed under the HOA boundaries." I opened the next document. "Actually, here's the county zoning map. Notice the line?" I pointed to a thin boundary curve. "That's where your HOA jurisdiction ends. The lake is outside it. You've been spending HOA funds on private land." Gasps filled the room. Her hands trembled slightly as she shuffled papers, pretending not to see what was in front of her. "We'll have to verify," I interrupted. "Already did." A week later, everything came crashing down for her. The county inspector came to assess the unauthorized dock construction. Turns out, not only had she used HOA funds illegally, but she'd also failed to get a permit for the dock. It was declared a code violation. Karen tried to save face by calling an emergency HOA meeting, accusing me of malicious interference. But by now, the residents had seen enough. They were tired of her micromanagement, her fines, her power trips. During the meeting, one elderly neighbor, someone Karen had fined repeatedly for having a bird feeder, stood up and said, "You told us this lake belonged to everyone. You lied." The room erupted. I stayed quiet until it died down, then calmly said, "You screamed community property in my driveway. You harassed me. You wasted our money. And now the HOA is facing legal penalties because of you." She turned red, stammering that it was all a misunderstanding. But the board voted right there to remove her as president and open an investigation into her spending. 2 weeks later, Karen was forced to resign. The dock was dismantled. The HOA had to reimburse me for property damage, and the county fined them for code violations. But the most satisfying part? Every letter, every fine, every ounce of frustration. It all ended with one quiet line in a courtroom. Property boundaries verified. Ownership confirmed in full. When Karen walked out of the hearing, she couldn't even look at me. Her reign was over. After Karen's downfall, the neighborhood changed. People stopped living in fear of fines and surprise inspections. The new HOA president, a retired firefighter named Mark, actually cared about fairness. The community started hosting small gatherings by the lake, with my permission. It wasn't about exclusion anymore. It was about respect. I built a small dock of my own, one that led out into calm, glassy water. Every time I stood there, I thought about how power can twist people, how rules meant to protect can become weapons in the wrong hands. Sometimes I'd see Karen driving through the neighborhood, slower than usual, windows rolled up. She didn't wave, she didn't scream, she was just quiet. I heard she moved away not long after. As for me, I stayed, because I believed the best revenge isn't yelling louder than your enemy, it's owning your peace, legally, quietly, permanently. Now, when new neighbors ask about the lake, I tell them, it's private property, but if you ask nicely, you're welcome to enjoy it. Because at the end of the day, power isn't about control. It's about knowing what's yours and never letting anyone scream it away. Community property? No. It was never hers to claim.